So we'll take a little trip down memory lane with our favourite Irish scientist, right, Luke O'Neill. And this is from News Talk in 2022. And the headline, Origin of COVID tracked to a single stall at the Wuhan market. So we'll have a little read. 3 major studies have concluded the COVID-19 virus came from a single stall at a food market in China. Right. So what does Luke have to say? Professor Luke O'Neill told the Pat Kenny show, quote, the Chinese scientists and an international consortium have now dug into all the data. The bottom line, as we know, it did come from the market. The Hunan seafood market is the source of this. No question now from that. There's a quote added here then. It was 2 separate events, they think, strikingly, in November, December, probably of 2019. Luke continues on. He says this discounts theories that the virus may have come from a laboratory. He says that decreases the chances the lab leak, because that would more likely to be one sample. All this data, as ever, pointing to a market source, firstly, and secondly, from animals in the market. Right. Now, take his word for it. So, look what he says. The bottom line, as we know this, it did come from the market. So let us go back to 2020, 2 years prior to Luke O'Neill's comments there. And this is from Politico, right? Bias and all that stuff aside. But top Trump officials pushed the COVID-19 lab leak theory. Investigators had doubts. So senior Trump administration officials decided in the spring of 2020 to strongly imply that COVID-19 came from a Chinese lab, even though intelligence officials investigating the pandemic's origins did not have conclusive evidence supporting that hypothesis, right? Remember that. The intelligence officials didn't back it. So now we come up to the present day in the round. So this is from the 26th of January of this year, 2025. And again, this is from News Talk. Headline, COVID-19 most likely caused by a lab leak, according to the CIA. Remember, those intelligence agencies that did not back Trump when Trump said that it came from a Wuhan lab leak. So, and remember also that Luke O'Neill said that we now know that it came from a market stall. He said this in 2022. We know this. So, we continue. The CIA now believes the COVID-19 pandemic is more likely to have originated from a laboratory leak in China than from animals. And people will say, well, look, science changes, the facts change, and people, they change their opinion based on the facts as they change. Lads, facts don't change. Facts don't change. If I meet somebody and they don't know my name, and I tell them my name is Bob, that's not a fact, right? That's a piece of information that they're after accepting. Now, if they go and investigate me and find out my name is really Keith, would they say that the facts of the situation have changed? No. Their understanding of the fact is all that has shifted. They have now come to understand and know the fact that my name is not Bob, it's Keith, right? It's the same situation here. Facts don't change. Something is the case or it isn't. It just depends on whether people know about that or whether people understand that enough to speak about that, right? Facts don't change. So any defense of Luke O'Neill or News Talk around this situation based on, well, look, science changes and all that sort of stuff, that's nonsense. And to double down on that, then we have it here. The findings are not based on new evidence, but fresh analysis of intelligence about the spread of the virus, its scientific properties, and the working conditions of China's virology labs, right? So what this is telling you is that information was already there to suggest strongly, as the CIA are now doing, that COVID-19 was leaked from a lab, or was the consequence of a lab leak, right? Now, whether that was intentional or not, I think that's probably going to be the next part of the story that unfolds before us in the coming weeks and months, right? So what's interesting here is that this is purely political as well. Because, so Trump was the president at the outset of COVID, for the most of the year of 2020 as well, right? So, as president, he's privy, if he wishes to look at it, to the information that the CIA have around this. So he's making very well informed suggestions to the public, right? He makes them as suggestions, sometimes as straight accusations, but he'll never come out and say, I read CIA papers and therefore, right? Because why would he do that? Why would he tell everyone where he's getting the information from, right? That could jeopardize things internationally and nationally. But he's not going to do that. So he just comes out and kind of throws these suggestions up in the air for people to grab onto and investigate themselves, which is fascinating, right? So news talk in 2020, all the way up to 2022, and as far as Luke O'Neill has been continuing to speak on it, I hope they get him back on and have him defend his position around this, right? Because I guarantee you, he would come out and say, look, facts change as more information comes out, all this sort of stuff. That's the power of science, right? It enables us to change our minds and alter our opinions and dig into the data. All this nonsense talk, right? When this information is not new. This information was information that was there from nearly the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? But what's interesting here is that given the fact that this information is new, given the fact that this information is not new, and this information was there, not DIS information, but THIS information, it was there at the time when news talk were very dismissive of the idea that it could be a lab leak, right? And Luke O'Neill dismisses it totally, claiming that he knows the stall itself, where it started, right? So, News Talk decided that they wouldn't take the word of a president who they should know was privy to the information that the CIA are now using or reanalyzing to come up with the conclusion that it was more than likely leaked from a lab. So News Talk made the editorial decision to not take the word of a sitting president of America who was privy to this information, and more information than News Talk were. They refused to take his word for it, and they would label it as a conspiracy theory, only to backtrack on it 4 or 5 years later and double down on it in between. So now they're backtracking, right? So what you're seeing here is a shift of narrative. So what it looks like to me, I'll get to that shortly. So now, headline. Trump suspends US foreign assistance for 90 days pending reviews. What are those reviews? So Trump said, go on away now, foreign aid industry and bureaucracy are not aligned with American interests and in many cases antithetical to American values, and serve to destabilize world peace by promoting ideas in foreign countries that are directly inverse to harmonious and stable relations internal to and among countries. Consequently, Trump declared that no further United States foreign assistance shall be disbursed in a manner that is not fully aligned with the foreign policy of the President of the United States. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio told members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee during his confirmation hearing last week that, quote, every dollar we spend, every program we fund, and every policy we pursue must be justified with the answer to 3 simple questions. Does it make America safer? Does it make America stronger? Does it make America more prosperous? Right, so what it looks like now is foreign aid, all of that money that's been pumped into, I suppose, Israel, Ukraine, and a plethora of other countries that are on the receiving end of American free money, essentially, right? Or influential money, or money that buys influence, okay? That's been suspended, pending audits and investigations into that money. And that will lead us naturally to Ukraine, who've received tens of billions and appeared to be able to demand this money from America and get it with no questions asked. Why would you think that is? So this is from Minot Daily News. And what year is this in? So March 2022, right? So this stuff has been floating around for years now. And he's offering up 2 positions. So either the first one is that Putin is just power hungry and wants to expand his country and his nation endlessly, and Ukraine is just in the way of that, right? Or he suggests Putin, on the other hand, claims only that parts, if not all, of Ukraine belong to Russia. He's intimated that the United States has been funding the development of possible biowarfare agents at laboratories in the Ukraine, and that these pathogens could be used as weapons against Russia, right? And this is all kind of hand-waved away as conspiracy theory, and this is just Putin is trying to justify his slaughter and all that sort of stuff, right? He might be trying to justify it, but he might also be right. Let's not commit a genetic logical fallacy here, right? Where, because we don't like the source of the information, we write the information off as false instead of having a look at it and seeing if there's anything to it, right? Because the devil can come, or the truth can come from the mouth of the devil as well. However you want to categorize the devil, right? So it continues. In fact, the similarities between the Ukraine Biolab story and the theory that SARS-CoV-2 emerged from the Wuhan Institute of Virology are remarkable. When COVID-19 began spreading throughout China and the rest of the world, the official story was that the virus had jumped species from bat to human, perhaps with an intermediary host in a wet market in Wuhan. Very quickly, some writers pointed out that the city of Wuhan had an international virology institute, and that bat viruses were being studied at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and that scientists who worked at the Wuhan Institute of Virology had published papers in which they described genetically manipulating those viruses to see if they could be made to jump species. This is called gain-of-function research. So, again, hand-waved, conspiracy theory, all that sort of stuff. Where are we? Right, so now we meet into Fauci. Fauci was called before Congress and insisted that the NIAID, this medical organization that I suppose he's employed by, or he gets funding for, or he conducts research for or with, had never funded gain-of-function research. An October 2021 letter from the NIH, another thing he's involved with, proved that this was untrue. The NIAID and the NIH had funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan. So Fauci was pumping money into research on viruses in order to genetically modify them, or to modify them in some way that they could jump from animal to human, or viruses that are predominantly found in animals could be manipulated so that they would infect humans, something that humans would naturally have some sort of resilience to or defense against. He was funding the study of manipulating viruses so that humans would be able to contract them more freely. This is what he was doing, right? So, and the very lab that Fauci was funding and conducting this research in, it just happens to be the very lab that this coronavirus is said to have leaked from, according to the CIA now, right? According to News Talk as well. And now look, naturally. So what does this have to do with Ukraine? A Washington Post article from 2005 opens with this statement, quote, "The United States and Ukraine agreed yesterday to work jointly to prevent the spread of biological weapons, signing a pact that clears the way for Ukraine's government to receive US aid to improve security at facilities where dangerous microbes are kept." So, there we have it. And this is from Grok. And all of this stuff, people, take this and have a look at it and go and look at it yourself and try and understand it and allow for a bigger picture to emerge before just smashing down each individual thing. So with each piece of information that you get your hands on, that you can't verify or disqualify yourself, hold it as a question mark and ask yourself, what if this was the case, right? What if I didn't believe Luke O'Neill? And what if the opposite was the truth, right? So this is from Grok, and it's just going over some of the claims that Putin has made, right? So one of Putin's justifications for the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 was the alleged presence of these biolabs, which he claimed were used by the US to develop biological weapons, potentially targeting Russians or other ethnic groups. These claims were used to frame the military operation as a necessary action to prevent biological threats. So what do we have here? On the whole, we have three things, right? So number one, Luke O'Neill doesn't know his arse from his elbow, or he's an absolute outright liar and fraud, which I think the latter is probably the case, right? Because he's parroting these things that he's heard and then being proved to being totally wrong and never backtracks on anything, right? In fact, he nearly uses the fact that he was previously wrong to further cement the idea that this elevates his status as a scientist, right? So my track record of being incorrect on things justifies the approach I take to gathering information, because I can change my mind as the facts change, right? So he's a waste of time, and he's brought people for walks down the garden path for these years, and he's probably influenced people's decision making that has directly impacted their lives and their health, right? Number two, news talk will disqualify information from a sitting president based on what exactly? Probably their political leanings, most likely. Only then to go hand in hand with the CIA as they reanalyze old information, right? Information that Donald Trump would have been privy to at the time. So that's a straight case telling you right then and there of who wags who, right? So news talk will go along with what the CIA say, but they won't go along with what Donald Trump says, right? That's important. That's very important. And the third thing, we see a shift now from Wuhan lab leak as a conspiracy theory to the CIA saying most likely came from China, which is what Trump has been saying all along, right? It most likely came from a lab leak in China and Wuhan. So is China, are they being saddled with all of the blame for this now? Or based on the, I suppose, pending investigations and audits into the money that's been funneled into Ukraine, are we closer to having it revealed that what Putin has been saying it was true, that Ukraine have been developing these biological weapons on the coast or on the border of Russia, essentially, right beside Russia. And that has been funded by America. Who were also funding these gain-of-function research in China, in Wuhan, the lab that the CIA is now saying the coronavirus probably leaked from, right? Are we about to have revealed to us that Ukraine was in some way involved in COVID-19 with China, or maybe on their own, right? Are we going to have that released? And are the CIA playing a little bit of defense here by trying to saddle China with it all? Fascinating stuff. And also the overarching question is always there of, was this an accidental leak, or was this biological warfare? Was this a weapon that was unleashed on the world? Because you'll remember RFK's statements as well, right? That there seems to be an ethnic vulnerability across different ethnic groups to coronavirus. Very, very interesting. So is this a naturally occurring vulnerability, or was this a genetically modified potency in the coronavirus, which would affect different ethnic groups differently in different severities? Really interesting stuff.